Welcome to the Spawn Chunks, episode number 296 for Monday, May 6th, 2024. This is a podcast all about Minecraft, available across all major podcasting platforms, including YouTube. If you're enjoying the show, consider subscribing wherever you're listening to this. My name is Joel Duggan, and joining me, as always, is my friend Jonny, but you may know him as Pixel Riffs, the one with the green thumb. Hello, sir.
Hello, yeah, we've been talking about gardening spaces and where we take the produce from those gardening spaces. We've been talking a bit about kitchens as well. A little bit of building talk that transcends the boundaries of Minecraft and goes a little bit into the real world. We've been talking about that on the Render Distance, which is the extended version of the podcast that our patrons get to listen to. If you want to listen to a little bit more chat from me and Joel every week, we do a pre and post show, and that's available at patreon.com/thespawnchunks. We also have monthly Minecraft hangouts with our patrons to figure out what they've been up to in Minecraft that month, and quarterly hangouts where you can hear the behind the scenes facts and figures of how the podcast is performing across all those podcast platforms. So if you're interested in any of that, once again, that's patreon.com/thespawnchunks.
So what have you been up to in Minecraft this week?
Well, I have been tasked with keeping a rabbit alive while digging a hole to bedrock. You can probably imagine how that went. So our latest challenge on Minecraft SOS was to adopt a non-standard Minecraft pet. And at first, it went quite well for me. I was given a rabbit to look after, or rather, I was tasked with finding a rabbit and then looking after it. And I had to drag this rabbit from a desert biome, probably about 2,000 blocks away from my base, through the nether, which included a soul sand valley next to a nether fortress with blazes firing at me from the wings. And somehow the rabbit survived that trip. So I got it back to the hole, name tagged it, and was actually able to dig out the majority of the stone layers of a chunk of my dig that's still ongoing. And it was obviously going a little bit slower because I was leashing this rabbit to a fence post to make sure it didn't run away. Fortunately, having handled rabbits a lot through my Minecraft bingo playing days, I'm pretty familiar with the mechanics of like holding a carrot or a dandelion out for the rabbit, and then that stops it from bouncing around so erratically and allows you to control its movements a little bit more. So it wasn't too difficult once I got in the flow of things to drop the rabbit into the hole riding in a boat with me, and then break it out of the boat, leash it to a fence post so it didn't end up jumping off the sides of the project I was working on, and make sure that it didn't fall into caves that I was exposing as I went down through the layers. So that worked out for the entirety of one live stream, and I thought, great, this is how we're going to work for the foreseeable future. I'll put the rabbit away in my storage room that can be like a little hutch, walled off with trapdoors at the back, and that's going to work great. Then I went on camera for a video to explain how I was doing this, and then the rabbit jumped off a 3-block high hill and died. So, yeah, I think I was to blame in the sense that I was getting a little bit impatient to start the next segment of the video where I was going to say, here we go, we line it up with the chunk that I'm digging into, and we just go straight down there with a boat. And I think I pulled the rabbit a little bit too hard off of the side of a hill, and it just squeaked and died in front of me, exploded into rabbit hide and raw rabbit. Which I've now renamed because I named the rabbit Hot Pot to begin with. I said to myself, this rabbit is probably not going to last, so I'm preemptively, effectively calling it Rabbit Stew. And it could have just been called Stewart. I think that would have been a pretty funny name as well. But yeah, a lot of people had a similar predicament. There was some people being tasked with keeping track of a baby slime, which can't damage you and will jump after you, but move incredibly slowly. Or a fox, which tend to run after any chickens that they spot in the nearby vicinity and could not be brought near my rabbit, otherwise the fox would end up killing the rabbit. So it limited collaboration a little bit this week, and it just made every meetup that happened all the more chaotic as a result of us having to bring our pets with us everywhere. But I think a few of them put together like a little Crufts dog show kind of style agility course for some of them, so that was a fun collaborative thing they did. With me, I had the rabbit for probably all of about 4 days before it ended up getting killed. So after that, I've just been back to business. I've been digging out more chunks of the hole. I've now almost completely uncovered the ancient city, which I've sort of left on its own platform before I destroy the buildings there and dig the rest of that out layer by layer. So it's starting to look like a really interesting top-down view of what an ancient city appears like now. And beyond that, I only have about 10 chunks of the hole left to dig. I'm still saving a couple for the 2v2 teams contest that I'm planning on ending the entire dig with, but so far I'm really happy with how the digging has gone.
I was about to say, man, like it really looks like a lot of progress has been made since the last screenshot. And the combination of exposing the ancient city and then the very skyscraper-esque look to the remaining chunks, which are all separated by at least a chunk,
Yeah.
kind of standing as pillars on their own, is a really interesting look, especially when you zoom out and you really get to see like the fog effect because you're so far away from the bottom that you
Yeah.
kind of lose it in the atmospheric rendering. Like it's wild,
And
wild to
I'm
see.
finding that because the fog is purely based on distance, you can still get some cool atmospheric shots if you decrease your field of view, and so you get like a bit of atmospheric fog. But if your FOV is 30, then you get that from like a much closer looking point of view.
Right.
And so we have a free cam mod that we can use to kind of look around builds without moving our characters, and so I've been able to get some really good screenshots from doing that without access to spectator mode or anything like that. And it's been fun playing around with how distant the bottom of the hole looks from certain angles and certain heights, and it really does help it look kind of atmospheric and unique that way. But yeah, we're very close to the point where I'm going to start rebuilding all of this in the sky, and outside of that, we've still got a couple of challenges on the way. So this is the server where we have a revival mechanic based on coins that we're able to earn from advancements and from different challenges. That's why I was given a rabbit in the first place. If I'd kept it alive for 2 weeks, I would have earned myself a couple of fate coins. It now costs 8 coins to revive somebody, and that's going to increase probably to 10 coins very soon. So we're now having to team up every time somebody dies in order to revive them and keep them in the series. And one of my other server mates, Eloise, put together a contest where we were hunting for mob heads. We have the mob heads plugin from Vanilla Tweaks that allows us to gather mob heads that aren't the standard zombie, creeper, skeleton ones. And of those, they were all assigned different point values. So the passive mobs like salmon and sheep and whatever were assigned fairly low points. And then, wither skeletons or the wither were assigned higher points. And then the top tier was zombies, creepers, skeletons, and the warden. And as somebody who has an ancient city basically in their backyard, I took full advantage of the warden one. The warden drops a head basically every time you kill it because it is unexpected that you're going to be killing them frequently. So, of course, the amount of effort that you have to put in means that you're guaranteed to get a warden head. And so I stood in the geode that's halfway embedded up the wall above the ancient city portion and just fired down onto a skulk shrieker with a bow and arrow until a warden appeared, and then just kept killing them as they appeared. And so over the course of an hour, I farmed about 30 warden heads, and I won the contest with 600 points. And I felt kind of cheap. I did feel kind of cheap doing that, but then it turned out that some other people had been farming the wither by just buying up all of the wither creation, the wither summoning kits that Fwip and I had been selling from one of our shops at Spawn after building the wither skeleton farm earlier in the season. So it was kind of funny to see people's different approaches, and they took it all in good humor when I said I'd been farming wardens for an hour. But yeah, that was a fun event. A couple of people died during that, and so having to revive those was very expensive for the server. But I am 2 coins richer as a result, so looking forward to seeing if I can revive anyone with those later.
With the warden heads, I imagine they look pretty different without the extra, I'm not sure what you want to call them, antlers, growths, like whatever they are.
Yeah, the tendrils.
It wouldn't be on the head, right? So does it feel very wardeny? Like, because the wither heads look like a wither head because, of course, the wither head just looks like a skull.
Yeah, no, the warden definitely looks very... Like, it looks like you've shorn the tentacles off, and it's just like the head with the mouth, basically. And of course, it's completely different size because it's player head size, and so it doesn't look entirely accurate, but it's at least recognizable, right, as a micro block. So yeah, I think it stands out among all of the other heads in that there aren't really any other mobs that super look like the warden either, so I think it does the job. But yeah, it is kind of a shame that you don't get a warden head in the same way that you get a piglin head, where it's still got the floppy ears and you can wear it and run around and the ears will flap as you move. Yeah
that would be a fun addition, is getting the actual warden head, so that if you put it on, it would be warden head size with the tendrils and stuff. Because then I mean, like, as a multiplayer server, kind of bit of fun. Like, imagine sneaking up on somebody wearing that, and if you could work it out in a way that they only see your head coming, like if you're below them or you pop up next to them while they're building, and you can keep the fact that you're just a regular player body hidden, and then just show the head, over the fence. It'd be like having a creeper costume or something like that. Like that level of surprise or teasing and trolling other players would be there for sure.
Yeah, I can imagine them applying mechanics similar to the pumpkin head overlay as well to kind of imitate the warden's blindness. So if the player puts it on, then maybe, you have to rely on directional audio in order to find anybody, and that could become kind of a fun mini game in itself. Is like, you're effectively your monitor switches off and you have to try and locate players in the vicinity. That'd be kind of fun.
Yeah, I've not done much with player heads or mob heads in terms of wearing them. I've certainly collected a few, and I've used some of the other heads with the data pack for the Wandering Trader, where we get like pumpkins and minerals and different things like that. But the animal heads that I have the most of are trader llamas. That tends to be the one that I have the most. And I want to say spiders. The spider heads are cool if you're getting the mob head data pack, and the spider heads are cool because of course they get the little glowy eyes on them, and I think that they look pretty neat.
Yeah. So have you found anywhere to use player heads on the Citadel this week, or is it they don't quite fit in the outdoor spaces so much?
I've purchased a lot because, of course, the Wandering Trader comes up to me outside in the fields as I'm working on the farm and basically stands, 6 inches from me and says, like, do you want to buy some stuff? And it's useful because we've got this data pack. And the last couple of times I've actually had to like stop what I was doing and be just like, all right, well, there's like a dozen blocks here that I really want, you'd be impressed with this. It was deep slate emerald ore,
my favorite,
which I actually had. I had two, and I sacrificed one to get like 8 mini blocks from the Wandering Trader in this data pack. So that happened a fair bit. But most of what I was doing was puttering around the front yard, I guess you want to call it, of the Lilac Farmstead, and it's the kind of thing that takes a lot of time. And weirdly, it takes longer to do like a natural looking patch of lawn than it does to do like a manicured farmland or beds of beetroot or whatever, because you want it to try and look overgrown, but you don't want to overdo it. And I had to do a custom tree, and it all came together pretty well. I've not done any of the pathing to I guess it'd be the west of the farm, just because I don't know what's happening on the other side of the path. And so there's no point in texturing the path if I have to move it or adjust it or whatever. But most of what I was doing was working on the front of the farmstead as it comes down to the main brick road, the main north road. So I changed the front path to stone. I transitioned that stone into dirt when you go around the back of the house. I put in kind of intentional wildflower gardens in the front. So like they're meant to be like, these are the natural flowers that would have been around, but the people that live here have kind of put them all in one space. And so it looks a little bit more natural. Really had a lot of fun with, oh gosh, I'm blanking on the names. Pink petals and what's the purple one that looks like a
lilacs, peonies, or pitcher plants?
No, the small one,
alliums.
Purple flower.
Yeah.
Alliums, thank you. Yes. Yeah, so the alliums go really well with the pink petals because there's just enough light purple in the allium that the pink petal, it seems to jive really, really well. So I was doing a lot of stuff like that. Also working in some flowering azalea bushes, which I don't use very often. But again, going with the purple of, the alliums and then the pinks of the lilacs and the pink petals, they work really well. And working those in a combination of like background bushes or just like, they kind of look like nondescript flowering bushes. But then on the backside of the farm, I needed some space to fill in, and I didn't want to do more lilacs. And so what I did was I used the flowering azalea bushes, sort of set up like I guess you can look at them like blackberry bushes or maybe grapevines, whatever, but just organizing them into rows instead of like the kind of typical
Hmm.
pile of bush blocks that make it look like a bush. Organizing it into rows, having clear paths between each one, having them not be on a straight line, but on slightly angled, kind of layout. And that really worked to help break up the back lot of the farm, bring in some green, show that there's a lot more going on, and kind of separate the major plots from like, well, the whole field is like lilacs and pitcher plants. And that looks to be like, that's the crop that they're harvesting and probably selling or providing to other people in the community. But then like the small carrot patch, the little beetroot patch, the flower gardens, and these little berry bushes all seem to be more like, well, we're growing this for like our
Hmm.
own consumption. They're smaller plots, they're closer to the house, that kind of thing. And it just, for me, it just provides a story. Like I like having a reason for the things that I'm doing. Just any kind of little logical twist on like, what's the reason I'm putting this here? Like, keep it close to the house, keep it small. It's probably more of a personal thing than a big, we're going to sell all the berries from this sort of thing. And so it worked out pretty well. And it's one of those things where I didn't have a lot to show for this week because those kind of details seem to take the longest because you're trying to make things look natural, and it's a lot of trial and error. I find like you're putting something down, you're changing it, you're moving it, you're putting something else down. That then inspires you to go back and change something you just took, 10 minutes to place, a few minutes ago. And it's a natural kind of evolution. It very much reminds me of drawing. Like if I'm exploring a sketch or exploring a design, I feel like there's a lot of iteration and redoing something, taking the things you like and moving them forward. And I feel like when you're doing landscaping like this in Minecraft, it's very much the same, where you start off with a general vision, but then by the time you're down to the bottom of it, you've done a lot of little tweaks and changes. And the hardest thing, I think, is to try to make it look
Yeah.
natural, because humans just in general make patterns, even when you're
Hmm.
trying not to. And that's my biggest thing. Like a lot of times I'd go back in with the shears and remove like 4 or 5 things that I placed down because it was too much and it felt too contrived. And it was better to kind of like less is more in some
Yeah,
cases,
yeah. It's that odd thing of like, if you want to make something truly random, you have to overdo it in areas where you don't expect to. Like if you ask somebody how many times heads is going to come up if you flip a coin, then people are going to predict it in patterns that don't really go longer than like 3 or 4 times in a row before you're like, well, a tails has to come up at some point. But then if you actually start flipping the coin, there'll be stretches where you don't get a tails for like 10 or something, and like people just aren't used to that
Yeah.
like level of probability. But that's how randomness works in nature and in the brains of people. It kind of operates very differently. Then again, you see nature sticking to, like golden ratio is a great example of this, right? You see nature sticking to certain patterns and like sticking to growing in specific ways, growing towards the light, and so like plants trailing a certain way. They have like not
Yeah.
necessarily a decision making process in the same way that we consider it as people with brains, but they'll at least have logic to how they behave. And it's observing those patterns you can actually start to get some neat stuff that feels random and organic whilst also making sense to our human brains that like logic and order.
Oh, I mean, I totally did that with those azalea bushes. Like after I put them all in and decided, yep, I like this rough layout, seems to work for me. I was going in and I was removing the lower flowering azalea bushes and replacing them with regular azalea, thinking that the flowers wouldn't happen right next to the ground. They'd be where the light was hitting them, on the outside bushes and the bushes that are got more air, more water, more, light exposure. And it also just broke up any kind of Minecraft pattern. Of course, once you get like a couple dozen blocks of all the same type in an area, it really starts to
Yeah.
look like a grid. And so by removing, out of a bush of 4 blocks, taking one flowering azalea and replacing it with a regular one, or taking some moss carpet and putting it on the top of one of the other azalea bushes, just removing one of the sides of exposed flowers in the pattern really helped break it up. And it really made it feel a lot more natural and like also sensical, like growing towards the light, thinking about where the sun is, east to west, and just little things. Again, for me, that logic and having a reason why you're doing something, your viewers or a player walking through that build doesn't necessarily have to know that you did that specifically for those berry bushes. But if you do that with everything, I feel that there's a vibe that they
Yeah.
just kind of pick up on. Like everything seems to have logic and reason, or there's a continuity between all the trees being darker on the bottom and lighter on top, or all the trees kind of leaning towards one way, or there's more trees where there's more water. Like that, just stuff like that just seems to make a little bit more sense. And it's not necessarily something that people are going to pick out individual things, because on their own, each one thing is not that super important. It's when you layer, 100 of those decisions together that Minecraft builds really start to have
you start to get that
own.
subconscious detail kind of put in that's going to really affect how people experience it, whether they recognize it or not. And that's really important for the immersion of things. We're going to be talking a lot about aesthetics and immersion later on in our main discussion, but I think ahead of that, we should probably start getting into the news.
Sounds like a plan. Kicking off this week, Minecraft Java Edition 1.20.6 was published on April 29th, just after we finished recording our last episode. There was a single bug fix. The tamed trader llama inventory was partially lost during the upgrade. That's been fixed. Minecraft Java Edition Snapshot 24W18A was published on May 3rd. New features in 24W18A. All features from the experimental 1.21 data pack have been moved to vanilla. Added 5 new paintings by artist Sarah Boving. Added 15 new paintings by artist Christopher Zetterstrand. Added 9 new music tracks. Added 3 new music discs. Under music, the 9 new background music tracks all play in the main menu. Some of these new songs can play in specific biomes in the game. Featherfall plays in Badlands, Cherry Grove, Flower Forest, and Lush Caves. Deeper plays in the Deep Dark and Dripstone Caves. Eld Unknown and Endless both play in Dripstone Caves, Groves, Jagged Peaks, and Stony Peaks. Poco Poco plays in Dripstone Caves, Grove, Jagged Peaks, and Snowy Slopes. The tracks Featherfall, Komarobi, Puzzle Box, Watcher, and Yakusoku have been added to the pool of songs which play in the overworld biomes that did not have a specific biome music. There have been 3 music discs added. Precipice by Aaron Sheroff can be found rarely in standard vaults. It has a comparator output of 13 when played in the jukebox. Creator by Lena Rain can be found rarely in ominous vaults, has a comparator output of 12 when played in the jukebox. And Creator Music Box Edition by Lena Rain can be found rarely in decorated pots broken in trial chambers, and that has a comparator output of 11 when played in the jukebox. There are 5 new paintings by artist Sarah Boving: Baroque, Humble, Meditative, Prairie Ride, and Unpacked, and 15 new paintings by Christopher Zetterstrand: Backyard, Bouquet, Cave Bird, Changing, Cotan, Fern, End Boss, Finding, Low Mist, Orb, Owl Lemons, Passage, Pond, Sunflowers, and Tides.
In changes in 24W18A, rotten flesh has been removed as a possible item for trial spawners to eject. Mace enchantments are now slightly more common from ominous vaults. Projectile knockback is no longer dependent on the shooter's position. And projectiles such as arrows and fireballs knock back in the direction that they travel. Projectiles such as splash potions and fireworks knock back away from themselves, and projectiles shot by a dispenser will also now knock back. They've updated the confirmation screens in realms to show as pop-ups. In a subsection of trial chambers, spider spawners have been moved to the melee category, and slime spawners have been moved to the small melee category. They've made various layout changes in intersections and corridors, adding a new trap dispenser style to chambers. Fixed various broken jigsaw connections in the corridors and made seams match up a little better. Added new entrance variations, fixed various broken or incorrect jigsaw data, and added empty chests to chamber entrances. Ominous trial spawners have also seen a couple of adjustments, with mobs that are unable to wear equipment such as spiders now spawning double the total mob count over the course of the challenge. These spawners will also have an additional mob out at once during each challenge. Bottles of Enchanting are no longer a possible projectile for ominous trial spawners. They were kind of considered initially, but decided that they didn't really have a huge impact. Copper doors and trapdoors have also been changed. This was a change that came to Bedrock Edition sooner, but was shortly followed in Java Edition. Copper doors and trapdoors are now crafted from copper ingots instead of copper blocks, and oxidized variants of these can no longer be crafted. You can still make waxed variants with honeycomb, but you have to start with a fresh copper door and age it in world, or find a door in a trial chamber perhaps that's already been aged. Technical changes in 24W18A, the resource pack version is now 33, and the data pack version is now 42. This data pack version adds new music disc items and loot table entries for the music discs. The painting variants are now data-driven. The item argument in the /give, /item, and /loot commands now supports removal of default components with an exclamation mark prefix. For example, /give at s diamond _ pickaxe with square brackets, exclamation point, tool will give you a diamond pickaxe without the tool components, so it gets you the item but not the tool's functionality along with the item. Enchantments are now data-driven, and enchantments that show up in the game are now controlled by enchantment providers. Enchantment exclusivity is now controlled through tags, and there are changes to predicates and loot table functions to support all of this. So the changelog article provides a lot of detail for each of these technical changes. It's a lot to read here, so if you want some more details, check out the changelog over on Minecraft.net. That'll be linked in our show notes for this episode as well. The fixed bugs of note in 24W18A include some old ones, actually. Entities not receiving knockback from projectiles fired from dispensers is a pretty old one. That's been fixed, along with arrows losing their punch enchantment property when unloaded, guardians being unaffected by the thorns enchantment, sweeping attacks not igniting other mobs when using fire aspect, Frostwalker Ice only being semi-affected by the random tick speed game rule. Silk Touch could not be combined with Looting or Luck of the Sea in Creative, that's now been fixed as well. Mob-type specific damage enchantments such as Smite, Bane of Arthropods were affecting all nearby entities when hitting the affected mob with Sweeping Edge. The slowness effect was applied to entities when the Bane of Arthropods enchantment was held in the offhand. Fire aspect enchantments from mobs could set you on fire even when blocking with a shield. The flow and bolt armor trims didn't grant the crafting a new look advancement for crafting something together with a smithing template. New effects were not required for How Did We Get Here or a Furious Cocktail advancements. Those have now been added, and axes were prioritizing scraping copper over allowing the player to block with a shield. That's just a short list of the bug fixes. There are a bunch of them in this snapshot. Once again, you can check out the Minecraft.net changelog article linked in our show notes to see the full list. Last of all, we wanted to direct your attention to the Painting the Overworld article on Minecraft.net for those who want to learn more about the latest batch of paintings added by artist Christopher Zetterstrand. We're going to be talking a lot more about these in our main discussion, but in this article, Zetterstrand shares his artistic process, which actually involves sketching a scene in 3D modeling software so he can move elements around before applying them to the canvas more permanently with oil paints. He also explains more about the process of downscaling the paintings to a pixel art scale. There are preview images of some of these paintings shared on Twitter at Minecraft or on the YouTube Shorts page of youtube.com/Minecraft, revealing that many of the new paintings are also new sizes, including 3x3 and 3x4 canvases, and others provide additional options for sizes like 4x2, which previously only had 1 or 2 possible paintings. Once again, we're going to get into that in the main discussion, but Joel, any highlights from the snapshots for you?
I'm sure a lot of other people are happy about copper trapdoors and copper doors being made out of ingots instead of blocks.
Yeah.
And I think that makes sense. I think it's consistent with how iron ingots are used to make iron trapdoors. I guess the only downside you could argue would be that now you have to wait for that copper trapdoor or door to oxidize if you want it to be a different color. But just like anything else, once you get it all the way oxidized, if it's past where you want, you can use your axe to strip it back down and then wax it at the desired state. So I think some of the challenges are going to be if you're using a copper trap door in, say, like a decorated part of a build, you're going to have to put down the regular one if you don't have an oxidized one already, and have potentially this weird kind of copper colored orange door there for a while until it gets to the right stage. And you can fix it. So some patience perhaps will be involved. I still think it's very strange that you put 6 ingots in and you get 3 doors, which are 2 blocks tall. And if you put 6 ingots in, you get 2 trapdoors, which are just 1 by 1.
Yeah.
It seems very odd that you get, the ratios seem strange.
Yeah, I think given the amount of community feedback that has led to this change and swapping copper blocks for copper ingots for the sake of consistency, I do sort of wonder how long it is before they revise the trapdoor recipe output, or before they maybe give some justification. It'd be great to, next time we have one of the developers on the show, to maybe pick their brains briefly about what's keeping trapdoors at like a 6 in to 2 out ratio, because you're right, it does seem a little bit stingy, and I would have been much happier with the copper block recipe. I recognized like the justification for it and being able to pre-craft a lot of the different ages of copper. I think it would have been more interesting if that output for copper trapdoors had been up to like 6 or 10 or 12 or whatever, just to justify the amount of material that was being put into them in the first place. But like you, yeah, I do like the fact that it's consistent with the other metal type that has trapdoors and doors associated with it, and I think it's maybe going to provide some interesting challenges for people like me who want a redstone based method of having this stuff age sort of in the background while you're doing other things and being automatically collected. Because trapdoors I could feasibly put into a copper aging machine like the existing setup I had for copper blocks, and those would work because they can be pushed around by pistons and slime block flying machines and everything else. But doors as a block have to be supported by a solid block underneath. If you push them with a piston, they either don't move or they break. And I'm fairly certain that if you set up like a large pad of blocks for the doors to stand on, and then if you detected the door aging a couple of stages, like the mechanism that I used in the copper aging facility, and then like have a piston push the door or have the block underneath it retract, you could drop it into a hopper, and that would allow you to get a bunch of like effectively farmed, fully oxidized copper doors. And so I'm already like puzzling over the mechanics of that in my head now that we have to pre-age them. Is like, how can I work that into an expansion to my copper aging setup? And that's the stuff that, like, every so often mechanics like that come along that I'm already a bit familiar with, and it just makes it fun to expand upon that and think of new variations on it.
This is a complete aside, but you're talking about the different metals in the game. I'm kind of surprised there isn't a gold trapdoor, because we've got gold pressure plates, but there's no gold doors and no gold trapdoors, and that would be a color that I think people would be pretty excited about having, like a bright yellow, use for it, especially if it became, I mean, copper doors have obviously they have a metal look to them, but they still have the windows in the door, and if the gold door was more akin to the dark oak door, like a solid, almost like a vault door. Like you could very easily see a gold door being like, well, this is where I'm going to keep all my richities, because I'm keeping the gold door is kind of like the indication all my fancy stuff is behind here, that could be really cool.
Yeah, imagining gold doors opening with gold pressure plates into this sort of like room festooned with gold blocks and ores and everything. Yeah, I can see that. I can see that happening for the ostentatious amongst us. And yeah, it would also add to the uses for gold, which I feel like lately, I don't know why this has crossed my path, but a couple of people have pointed out this observation that gold isn't really used for a whole lot, especially considering it has a tool set that nobody really goes to because the tools aren't really worth that much and they're not very durable. And then aside from that, people on servers, if you've got a server economy that revolves around buying stuff with diamonds, people tend to make gold blocks and gold farms and everything, and then people are using that for maybe powered rails, and that's kind of it. That's the only useful thing that a lot of people can think of as using gold for. So I think it's overdue, I think, for some kind of upgrade or some additional crafting recipes that involve it, because aside from its value to piglins now, there's not a huge amount of other uses for it.
I was about to say the piglin bartering is probably one of the more recent uses for gold. That and a color of armor trim, that would be the other use case for it, right? But none of those are like block, like you're not making something necessarily with gold, you're using gold for something. Those are the only two that I can think of. With the use case on the Citadel for me is that the golden carrots are like my go-to food. So when I'm farming and repairing stuff at the piglin farm, I'm using that gold to then coat carrots and use for food. But again, like I'm not building with it. I'm not creating other items with it. I do have a gold helmet that keeps the piglins away from me in the nether, but like that's that's one of those things like you do it once, and unless you die and you lose it, like you're not constantly using it, for there's not a lot of consumption of gold, I guess, in the game outside of, like you mentioned, piglin bartering.
Yeah, I mean, it's literal consumption in the case of your golden carrots, but I tend to buy those from farmer villages as well. So a lot of the time you can bypass the need for using gold for that much stuff if you needed to, and that might be it. That might be part of the reason we don't use gold more, is that there are so many alternate routes to getting the same result. I think if you added gold doors and trapdoors, it would be a good thing for them to have different functionality to the other ones, though, because I think Mojang lately is in the habit of not adding stuff like that unnecessarily unless there is a compelling new mechanic that can be added to it, or a way that it behaves that is slightly different from the other stuff. And with gold being soft, I'm sort of imagining maybe the gold trapdoor gets dented and that changes it aesthetically, or if you jump up and down on it too much, maybe it gives way, sort of like Dripleaf does. And
that could be interesting.
It could be. It could give you some interesting mechanics as far as parkour challenges go. Like, you can stand on it for a while, but if you jump up and down on it too much, it starts to cave in or something. I don't know. Just trying to think of ways that might mimic gold's like limited durability in other areas.
Yeah, and something like that would be really interesting in a farm where, like, maybe you want the mobs that drop into a chamber to stay there for a specific amount of time. And standing on a gold trap door, they would be there for a specific amount of time, and then it would then open and drop them without you having to then power that trap door with a redstone signal. Like, it would just be a certain amount of time with a mob on it, it drops, and then it resets to its default position, and then sort of like a rinse and repeat, almost like a valve. Like there's some potential there, I think.
Yeah, we'll we'll see if anybody from Mojang listens to this and has any feedback on that idea. They've probably got other stuff to do. But speaking of feedback, do we have anything else we want to touch on from the snapshot before we move on to chunk mail?
The only thing that I noticed, which is something we were talking about in our main discussion last week, was of course that Precipice Creator and the Creator Music Box are indeed the discs. They stood out to us on the soundtrack, and we kind of, like, our 2 cents was like, those are probably the discs because they're so different from everything else on the album that and it turns out that was the case, so it makes sense to me.
Yeah, and they're all from trial chambers, because that's obviously the main place that you'd expect to find like new loot in this update, so that makes perfect sense to me.
I'd have to go back and listen to, like, kind of make another note of my favorites, but I feel like a lot of the ones that were specifically called out as being in Badlands or Deep Darks or Jagged Peaks, I don't go in those areas very much, so I kind of sometimes wish that some of the music tracks would still be available across other biomes as well, not just limited to, but I guess the ones like Featherfall, Puzzle Box, Watcher, those ones that are going to be not biome specific, I'd have to refresh my memory, but I also feel like those were the ones that also felt like very vanilla Minecraft. So they might pair better if you get some of the original soundtrack and then one of these comes in, if they're specifically written for that purpose to complement the OG Minecraft stuff. Then I can see why those are the ones that are not biome specific.
Yeah, it makes some sense, I think, and it's surprising, I think, to a lot of people that none of them are specifically tied to playing while you're in a trial chamber. Like, I was expecting at least Puzzle Box to be almost like the soundtrack to a trial chamber experience, but then, of course, since they can appear in basically any biome, and the music is already tied to which biome you are in, if there's a dripstone cave, does it play the trial chamber music if you're in there, or does it play the dripstone cave music? And I can see why they want to keep it tied to a specific biome instead of a specific, like, instead of splitting it into all of the potential structures. So while it seems like a surprise from a game mechanics perspective, I think in terms of the back end code that's probably written for how music plays, it makes sense for them not to adjust that too much.
Moving on into email, if you would like to email the show, the address is spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. And episode 300 is fast approaching. We are planning an all Q&A episode to celebrate, to try to include as many members of the community as possible. If you'd like to send in a 1-sentence question asking us about anything you want to ask us about, Minecraft, podcasting, video games, inspiration, and experience, all that kind of stuff. Keep them fun, keep them short, and be sure to add 300 Q&A in the subject line so your email can be filed and easily organized for that show that should be coming up on June 3rd, if my calendar is correct.
Yep, so you got about a month to get those emails in. In the meantime, our first email today comes from Shibaphobia with the subject of Better Wolf AI. Hello, Joel and Jonny. I am very excited for the new Wolves in 1.20.5 and have been waiting for this for practically a decade as a long-term Java player. While I love the new variants and armor, I wish Wolf AI had been updated as well. A couple of changes I think could be added are a faster pace for wolves to keep up with the player, following their initial path through landscapes and caves. Doing so would decrease the chances of a wolf getting lost or left behind when exploring, and keep them from teleporting to an inconvenient spot. Packs of wolves could either be in a single file line or more of a formation, but still wander in the area if the player is still or in a small space. Wolves attacking mobs could be more decisive, not focusing on mobs currently attacking the player, but rather focused on another nearby mob or a mob fleeing with low health. This would add a bit more convenience and stability in keeping a wolf with you for protection and security. It would also keep a wolf from getting in the way of combat and accidentally killing them. This could be applied to traversal as well, like pushing a wolf off a cliff or into a cave. I'm sure these implications could be difficult to program into Minecraft, but let me know what you guys think and what could be changed or improved upon. Still new to the podcast, loving the takes you guys have on the game. Thank you. Shibaphobia's wolf took the final blow to save his owner from an evoker using magic.
I don't have much experience with wolves. One of the reasons that I don't is because I find the wolf AI as it exists not to be super helpful, so I haven't really bothered with them much. I think speeding up a tamed wolf movements to keep up with the player is a solid idea, though. When I was messing around with wolves and tamed wolves, I did find that they often lagged behind, and I think that's a good point of keeping them up with the player, but also keeping them behind the player so that they don't teleport and accidentally get knocked into a ravine or something that's a problem, right? Especially if it's early game and you don't have a really easy way to get them out of a situation, or you don't have armor on them yet and they take a lot of damage or potentially die. That can be really, really frustrating. So that's one of the reasons why I've not really messed with the wolf AI or the wolves in general. I don't know about the effort to make wolves travel in coordinated packs. I mean, this is anecdotal, but I don't see a lot of players using wolves specifically in combat beyond the novelty of like, hey, it's new and it's cool and it's in this update, but I don't know how long it's going to last. And I feel like having wolves act like a force field around the player, attacking mobs that are not attacking the player, but just because they're hostile mobs that are in the area, that's probably not the intention behind what Mojang was looking at when they designed this. I think they want the wolf, or the tamed wolf, I should say, to still very much react to what the player is dealing with, so it's more concise. And I think part of the don't hit the wolf because it's in front of you attacking the skeleton idea is like, well, that's part of the idea of having a wolf. Like, you have to have the skill to use it, but then also not hit it by accident. And I think that's kind of by design.
Yeah, I think if the wolves go out and attack other mobs around you, it's going to be difficult to keep them from doing that in situations where you don't want your wolf to take damage. So
Yes.
That's like the main thing, right? Is that you don't want your wolf to just wander off and start attacking stuff whenever it wants to. You want it to feel like a tamed animal that's responding to your commands. So I think maybe a better approach to that, although one that doesn't really have any kind of precedent in Minecraft so far, would be, I'm thinking about any first-person game where you have control over a team. Mass Effect is one of the first ones that springs to mind for me, of like being able to issue commands to your teammates to say like stay or follow or like, branch out, fan out, cover me, whatever you wanted to say. And I think if there was a way of doing that with wolves, for wolves to learn some kind of like verbal commands that the player could initiate, then that would make them a lot more tactical in their use and would cover bases like this where you actually want your wolf to be away, like watching your back while you're dealing with the mob that's in front of you, and not have the wolf jump in front. But then we just have like stay or follow when it comes to wolves being able to like sit down or stand, and they only attack when they're in following mode unless the skeleton or whatever is like right next to them. So I think there's there's a limited amount that to which we can incorporate that into Minecraft's current methodology. And I think anything more advanced than that, you're getting into like, how does the wolf know, and how do you make that tactile for the player, without having like a radial wheel of commands like you'd have in, a more advanced game like Mass Effect.
Yeah, I think that when I think about dogs and all the things that I've been learning about dogs in general, having things like an emergency down and a solid recall are two of the things that I see dog trainers talking about all the time on social media.
Yeah.
And that could be kind of implemented. I mean, recall is kind of automatic because the dog just teleports to you if you get too far away, or the wolf does in Minecraft. But wolves sit. But one of the most common positions for a dog in real life is lying down. Yeah. And it would be interesting if you could just right click again. So like you right click to make the tamed wolf sit, and then you right click again to put the tamed wolf in a down where it's like on its belly with its legs out in front of it. And maybe if it's in a down, it will not go anywhere. Like it is 100% stuck there. Whereas if it's just sitting, it'll stay seated until either you get in danger or something that's hostile comes within range. So if you don't want it to attack anything, put it in a down position, and then it's just going to ignore the world like nothing else exists. The recall thing, I think there's no real way to do that like with a Minecraft interface. I think you're kind of stuck with the teleport as it is now.
Yeah, I do agree with Shibaphobia's idea of making wolves faster. I do think they should move at a different speed to other mobs. And that was one of the pieces of feedback I had during them testing wolf armor was, like, if this dog starts chasing a skeleton, sure, the skeleton's going to run away. The dog's running after it at exactly the same speed. And it becomes this, like, perfect Scooby-Doo chase kind of thing where they're never quite catching each other. And, like, the skeleton can sometimes like pause in its AI to turn and try and shoot the wolf, and the wolf has no response to that. So I think maybe if they get damaged, they get a little burst of speed or something like that even could help even the odds slightly between them and ranged combatants that are going to have an easier time keeping a wolf at bay. But yeah, I can understand why they don't make too many of those decisions. I just think it would make wolves a bit more dynamic if they had the option to do that.
I wonder if something like having armor on the wolf could be used to speed it up. It's counterintuitive because you think that would weigh the wolf down. But maybe enchantments on the armor, like enchanted wolf armor, could have, speed boost or something like that. That could be interesting. Do tamed wolves gain any kind of speed boost if they're in range of a beacon that's owned by the same player? Or is that
I think beacons are just player only. I don't think any mobs under any circumstances really get affected by beacon effects. You can splash them with a speed potion, so maybe that's part of what they're expecting players to do if they want to use wolves a bit more tactically, speed potion, or I'm trying to think of what else, maybe fire resistance or something could be tactically advantageous.
Right.
Yeah, I can't imagine a situation where water breathing would be super necessary, but you never know.
Hey, look, that's how my first tamed wolf died, was drowning in a koi pond that I was building that was a foot deep. You're just kind of like, it was really frustrating. It's one of those things where like you're giving the dog this is for your own medicine and your own good because it's for your own stupidity. Fire resistance and water breathing.
If we could equip the wolf with a turtle shell helmet, so it could have, for a start, both the scutes as armor, but also have that like extra minute of water breathing that it gives you. Honestly, I think invisibility would be a super underrated effect for wolves. Imagine like a stealth wolf attacking something. Like you fire a bow at somebody from a distance, and suddenly they're getting attacked by a bunch of invisible wolves that they can't see. That'd be pretty sneaky as far as strategies go.
Just the red eyes of the mad wolf, just like the invisible spider, it's like the red eyes floating at you. Like that would be weird, especially with all the noises. Like that would be pretty creepy, actually.
Yeah. You'd have to know about the attack ahead of time, but it could be quite lethal. Nursing Geek in our live chat is suggesting strength potions as well, and that would be a fun way of even further upgrading your wolf against some tricky enemies.
Our next email comes in from Finn S. Minecraft Utility Belt. Hi, Pix and Joel. I was listening to episode 283 where you were talking about the potential benefits of having second hotbar added to the inventory, accessible through the Alt key. I thought it would be cool if you could craft a utility belt with shulker shells and some other ingredients like string and leather. This utility belt could be worn instead of leggings or combined with leggings and an anvil and would give the player access to this second hotbar while wearing it. It could have an interface similar to a bundle, though the player could organize and edit the extra hotbar. This could also allow individual utility belts to have their own unique hotbars assigned to them. Curious to hear your thoughts. Finn died of frustration because he had to constantly switch out the blocks on his hotbar while building his mansion. I feel the pain because nothing fills my inventory quite like landscaping. The number of plants and dirt textures and everything else, it really gets filled up fast. What do you think about a utility belt?
I still think it's a solid idea. I mean, just based on my experience in other building games recently, playing Enshrouded and having the ability to switch between hotbars like that, Stardew Valley has a similar mechanic as well, and you're not doing as much building in that, but there's certainly a utility to swapping between layers of your inventory if you're you set up your combat stuff on one hotbar and your farming stuff on another hotbar. You're well equipped for a trip to the mines in the middle of a day where you've also got to farm and tend to your crops. So I think there's definitely utility to be found in it, and making it an objective in game, tying it to another reason to go to the end and acquire shulker shells. I think it branches out into other crafting paths for ingredients that only really have one use so far, which I think is kind of a cool idea. I'm also imagining now in my head, the mischievous part of my brain is imagining, is it Rob Liefeld, the artist who draws a lot of like really hefty looking, like very muscular Marvel characters, but they always have like pouches and stuff. They've always got like a lot of like Deadpool. Utility stuff going on. Yeah, totally. Yeah. And like Captain America with the massive chest and just like a belt full of pouches and stuff. I'm imagining him drawing Minecraft Steve just as like this really muscular, the kind of guy who can carry around like a full stack of cubic meters of gold or whatever. But yeah, with all of the additional pouches and utility belts and stuff as well. That's a compelling image.
Yeah, when I think utility belt, like I think Batman. Like that's kind of what I go to, is the kind of pouches and things. And or like my brain goes to the little graphic that they used in World of Warcraft for your first like backpack, and it wasn't really a backpack, it was like a utility pouch, it was like a fanny pack almost, and it had like 6 slots in it. But 6 slots is all you would need if you want to get your tools off of your hotbar into a utility belt, then that would make sense. I like the idea as well that it's made in game. It's not just adding something to the UI in the game. Like you will start without it, and therefore when you get to the end game and you can craft it and use it, you see the value of it because you have been without it for most of your game experience up to that point. And I think that's a solid idea. There is a balance there where like that means that people in peaceful mode won't be able to use it. So like that might be a point of contention where they would want to make it accessible for everybody, and making it part of the UI would make it accessible to everybody from the get-go instead of having it be something crafted in game. But maybe I'm just showing my survival player bias, but I like the idea of crafting it in the game. As far as it getting on the player, I don't know whether you add a new slot. Like, do you add a new body slot for belts and then allow people to then change the color of them, do personalization that kind of way? Or just like they were saying, do you sacrifice the pants and then say, all right, well, if you don't want to wear your leggings, you have this, like you could wear a belt instead. But I think that goes back to something, I think it was Ulraf that talked about it on the show, where it's such an appealing idea that essentially you're forcing people to play without leggings by making the belt and the leggings like not like exclusive, that you cannot wear both at the same time. So then obviously Finn decided like, well, maybe you could combine the leggings and the utility belt on the anvil. And that led me down a bit of a funny idea of just like, well, maybe you could have an enchantment for leggings. Like maybe you don't need a belt at all. Maybe you just enchant leggings to have pockets.
The pockets enchantment is very good. Right? I like that a lot. There's a lot of ladies out there probably wish they could apply the pockets enchantment to like a skirt or any item of clothing designed for women. Yeah,
no, and that's what I thought it could be called. It has pockets. Like that would be the name of the enchantment. I think that's worth looking at, because then it doesn't mean you have to add anything. It's still something that's gated. Like you'd have to have the enchantment. So you have to have the enchantment table. Like you're not going to have it immediately when you start the game, but it's something that you could apply later on. Because I think that the number of people that would want the extra inventory slots would outnumber the people by far that would want to keep their leggings if you had it exclusive. So I think that would be something that they would have to consider. I don't mind the combining thing, but I think that the combining the utility belt and the leggings on an anvil, to me, just there's been nothing like that in Minecraft ever. Um,
Yeah.
outside of like combining two like things on an anvil to repair them, like two bows or two swords or things like that. But yeah, I think there's some potential there, and I kind of like the idea of a belt slot. I think it's the kind of thing where like you have that in a lot of other RPGs. Like when any kind of RPG where you have armor slots, it's like helmet, shoulder pads, chest plate, belt, leggings, boots, usually bracers. So there's more going on in most other RPGs compared to Minecraft when it comes to armor. So a belt could be fun, and if there was a way to do it where it could be a little bit more unique to you in the same way that armor trim. I mean, I guess maybe if they add a belt, they just add armor trim patterns to the belt, and then you can make it whatever color you want.
Mm-hmm.
That could be interesting too. It would be potentially a great way to help with the situation that I deal with all the time. I wear a gold helmet, not because I like it, but because it's the easiest thing to wear that keeps the piglins away when I go in the nether. I would rather have a gold belt and then have a proper helmet, because I mean, my gold helmet has all the normal enchantments on it, but it's a pretty soft piece of armor. It's not really doing anything other than aqua affinity and those kind of things, water breathing.
Yeah.
And then keeping piglins away. The only reason I didn't do boots is because I wanted netherite boots because I jump off of stuff so often that I wanted something really, really durable, right?
Yeah. I'm loving the idea of like you just have a gold belt buckle and then like a piglin walks up to you, just like eyeballs your belt buckle, is like, cool buckle, bro, like fist bumps you and just like goes about his business, like it's it's a cute idea. And I think there's obviously an extent to which we're stretching things a little bit. Like I think the gold helmet thing is really just like a concession to, yes, you are weaker, but you're also not being attacked as much, and so like it balances with swapping gold armor out for piglins. But I do think there's room for stuff like this in future, whilst they're pondering why players have issues with inventory and what can be done to make inventory more approachable and, have a few more quality of life changes that aren't necessarily huge sweeping inventory expansions or addressing one part of the problem or the other. I think there's lots of little things like this, similar to bundles, that like there are the subtle ways that you can change UI and inventory management a little bit for the better. So I'm not entirely against it. Like, I think it sounds like a cool idea. It's just a matter of, does it feel Minecrafty enough, and does it work across all platforms? We're joking about pockets, and Archeoplays in our chat said gives a whole new meaning to Pocket Edition, and I think that's the main thing is like, do you have that? How does that work on your mobile devices? Do you add an extra UI button just so people can swap between hotbars? Does that pop up once you've equipped the item, if it's an item equip thing, or is it always there and just grayed out? There are so many different little tweaks to that. And I've seen Pocket Edition changes with the UI and the distance between the movement buttons and stuff like that. Some people are so used to that when little changes like that happen, I hear about it on the Minecraft Reddit or somewhere. Everybody will start to come through and say, I don't like these new controls because suddenly the buttons are in different places and my muscle memory is just completely gone. And so you've got to be very, very careful when adjusting stuff like that, I find.
Moving on to the main discussion, we're going to talk about the new paintings. There are 20 new paintings, which is a lot of new visuals being added to Minecraft. We're going to talk about what the advantage of all this might be, painting sizes, new painting just topics and colors in general. Also, we've got things like where new paintings high in the list in terms of were players wanting new paintings. I don't see this being a thing that I've heard of in the past. Happy to have them, but it seems like a bit of a left field, considering. We'll have a link to the Minecraft Wiki article in our show notes this week, which will outline all of the paintings in Minecraft, but also highlight the ones that are in 1.21 or in the snapshots at this point.
Yeah, so we've talked a little bit about the Sarah Boving paintings already. They were introduced in a recent... I'm not sure if it was in a snapshot because they've been added to the Java snapshots, but they were at least introduced, via social posts and stuff like that. So we got to look at those. That was including the one with villagers that had the kind of American Gothic reference, the single rows. I think if you go a couple of episodes back in our podcast feed, I think we talked about them, maybe episode 293, 294. So we've had a bit of opinion about that. And I think those really set themselves apart from Christopher Zetterstrand's work in that they seem very in-world for Minecraft, right? They are very much references to things that you would see in Minecraft. There's a player riding a horse, there's a couple of villagers, there's a flower, there's a still life that features a decorated pot and a sunflower. And so those feel like they come from in the world of Minecraft itself. Whereas I feel like the main thing about Christopher Zetterstrand's work is that his paintings all feel like they come from outside. They are real life paintings that have been digitally scanned and, shrunk down, often with painstaking approach to making them look like pixel art equivalents, so they aren't just kind of compressed images. So that the subject matter still kind of comes through and stands out a little bit, but they still feel like they are from outside the world of Minecraft. And so that's one of the things that really stood out to me about the article that they published on Minecraft.net is he said a lot of players find these mysterious. They find them not so much immersion breaking as just maybe a sign of what's out there in the world of Minecraft, in the world of Minecraft having its own culture and sort of what's possible. So I think the best place for us to start is to talk about how we relate to the paintings that are already in Minecraft and how we relate to the new stuff that Christopher Zetterstrand has added with this update.
So I'll start by saying that I think one of the reasons why I find that the new paintings a bit left field is because, and this is all subjective, of course, I don't particularly like the paintings in Minecraft. They've always stood out to me as odd at best, and they never really felt like they fit the rest of the game for me. So I just didn't use them that much. And also the process of getting them in the game where you have to have a space big enough and then you have to put it down a number of times until you get the one that you're happy enough with. Yeah. And I never felt like I was looking for a specific painting to be like, yes, that's the one I want. It's like, this is the one I don't want the least. It's kind of how it's how it went for me. Yeah. So I've never really been all that excited about them. However, the new paintings I feel in some ways are small enough and sometimes nondescript enough to work depending on what you want to achieve with the painting. So the orb, the find, the orb especially has a real vibe about it. And if you're making something dark and creepy, then I think that might be something that would work, because when you take the detail of these large paintings and you bring them down into the pixel art, they really kind of lose a lot of their subject matter, and it just becomes more of a mood, a color, a emotion that kind of gets portrayed with often I find the creepiness of it. I think a lot of Christopher Zetterstrand's work to be dark in terms of the palette, melancholy, almost muted, like which doesn't go well in my mind with all of the vibrant colors that you get in Minecraft. You know, paintings were something that you learn how to make very early in the game, and you're still dealing with bright oak wood, probably green grass in a meadow biome somewhere, and bright colors. So a lot of the stuff that I'm seeing in the new paintings seem to go against that. They don't seem very bright and colorful. Contrasted with Sarah Boving's paintings, which I prefer, because even though the subject matter is a little simple, a little straightforward, things like Unpacked or Baroque, they feel more like pixel art from the get-go, which I think matches what's happening in Minecraft better. So I feel like they line up more with the surroundings. Like specifically, I think it's Baroque that has like the cake and stuff in it. And that to me is like, that really works, because it might not be my choice of subject matter. I don't perhaps want a picture of a cake on my wall. But the fact that it's a Minecraft cake, very recognizable next to a pot, like you're just like, okay, well, that would make sense in finding it in a villager's house, or, making my own villager house and using that as a decoration, that kind of thing. When you compare that to the owl lemons, which is a two-dimensional owl inside of a box next to some lemons. It reminds me of the still life assignments that I had, not in university because they didn't do this to us, but when I was taking still life drawing lessons in high school on like a Saturday, the art instructor basically would turn over a trash can in the middle of the room and you'd be tasked with drawing that as still life. And one of the first things that you learn when you're doing it is this like, it's a pile of garbage. Like, it's uninteresting. I don't want to draw this. I mean, yes, it's an exercise in learning light and shadow and all that stuff, but you're like, it's just a pile of stuff. And that's what when I look at the owl lemons, like, it's just a pile of stuff. And none of it is related to Minecraft. There's no owls. There's no lemons. I mean, yes, we have boxes, but they're not like that. Like, it feels so non sequitur that I don't understand what the decision-making process was behind selecting some of these paintings and going like, yes, let's put that in Minecraft. But again, it's all subjective. So somebody at Mojang likes all of these, or a number of people do. And they decided like, this is what we want to put in the game. And I don't know how much of that was because Setterstrand was one of the original artists that did paintings in Minecraft. And so they've returned to that to keep it consistent. And I don't necessarily think personally that was a great decision because I don't think it lends itself to having a wide range of new paintings. Because if you look at the old ones and you look at the new ones and you just think about the overall palette and mood, it's roughly the same. It's not like there's a lot of diversity. Whereas I find that through Sarah Boving's work, there's a lot of diversity in terms of the color, the palette, subject matter, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about Christopher Setterstrand's stuff is that he was painting a lot of these around the same time he did the original set of Minecraft paintings that were in the game before this. Like, I think some people from the community found an image of him working on or having just completed the one where the skull is on fire in the foreground and there's just like a Minecraft landscape scene in the background. And that is on an easel in his gallery or like work studio with one of the other paintings that's just been added over on the back wall. I think it's The Passage. And so people recognize that, these have been, existing works of his for a while, and they've just kind of shuffled through them and gone, which of these feels like it meets the vibe of Minecraft? Apparently he worked quite closely with Jasper Burstra, who's the art lead for Minecraft now. So they kind of went through his existing work. Maybe a couple of additional paintings were made specifically for this, but it seems like a lot of it is just adding onto his already, his existing library of contributions to the game, which is why I think they've kept a lot of the same tone, a lot of the same subject matter, that kind of melancholy vibe that you were describing. And I think it's really worth people going to the Minecraft wiki and scrolling the list of paintings because they've done a great job of compiling, a link out to the originals of each of these paintings. And they're linked from the title column in that table of paintings that exists halfway down the article. And these have a bit more context for what the in-game painting might be missing. Like, in our last discussion about this, you brought up the one that's just like a scene from Donkey Kong and saying, like, this feels ludicrous because it's like an in-game reference to another video game. And obviously Donkey Kong doesn't exist in the world of Minecraft, so why is this here? And while it doesn't necessarily suddenly transform it into something that would fit Minecraft, that Donkey Kong scene has some stuff above it that is cropped out of the in-game canvas and might actually fit better in one of the newer aspect ratios, some of the newer canvas sizes that they've added with the new paintings. But I think it's interesting to know that there is more context, and if people are amused by that Donkey Kong scene and want to go look at what the original looks like, they're going to find something a bit different. There's also some context on that Minecraft wiki article for any existing artworks that the paintings refer to. There are like cheeky references to some classical artists, and there are even some collage elements taken from existing artworks to create some of these newer ones. Like, my favorite example of this is The Backyard, which is one of the new paintings that was added in this most recent snapshot, where there are elements of two paintings from both the 1600s and 1700s by two different artists, and they've been collaged and effectively kind of painted over with more modern elements. So instead of this just being like, a backyard in Greece or somewhere where there's an archway and like a little garden area with a trellis and overhanging plants outside, the two women on the right-hand side of that are added in from a separate painting, and around them there's like modern stuff. There's like graffiti, there's a Pepsi mural kind of like applied to one of the walls, and there's some cleaning equipment. There's like a vacuum cleaner that's kind of upended on its side. And this is, I think, part of the motifs in Christopher Zetterstrand's work is that he's trying to blend the kind of modern classical styles of painting with the video game landscape, but in a more abstract way. And so there are elements like there's pixel art looking stuff that he has painted with oils on canvas over something that looks like a much more classic landscape that somebody like Turner or whoever would have painted. And I think there's an odd, like, uncanny element to that where it feels very jarring. And I think especially the ones where you're looking at it as though you're looking from backstage. I think there's one in the newer crop of paintings that's like a scene change, and it's like you're looking at a theater stage. Somebody's like changing their costume in the foreground, and in the background there are two separate environments as though they're being painted on stage flats. And it's interesting with the amount of like metaphysical stuff Minecraft helps you think about with the end poem, and like whether you are living in a simulation and whether what you're doing in Minecraft is a simulation, and you're looking at stuff from the outside. And I think from an artistic standpoint, if you're looking at the intellectual layers of it, I think that idea suits Minecraft quite well. It sort of brings up the question of what value there is in having paintings in Minecraft in the first place, especially when, if you reduce them to pixel art, you don't necessarily get the vibe of that painting in-game, right? Like, looking at the pixel art versions, they don't evoke the same stuff as the real-world paintings do. And so I wonder if it's quite as effective taking such complex subject matter and trying to distill it into something that players are looking at in-game.
I mean, I think that's a really good point about being distilled down and putting it in the game, because that Owl Lemons one that I mentioned, you don't get enough detail in the pixel art to see the collage-like elements that Zetterstrand is trying to portray with his painting technique. Like, the owl in the box is meant to be like a paper cutout of an owl that has been placed in the box, and then he's painting the paper cutout as he sees it lit in front of him on the table, assuming. But you don't get that when you look at it in the pixel art. It just looks like a weird little, two eyeballs, and I guess you're seeing a beak only because it's called owl. Like, if it wasn't called owl, I don't know that I would get an owl from that. Like, it looks just as much like a lemur or a panda as it does an owl, because you're dealing with 16 pixels by 12 pixels or whatever, how big the face is, right? Same with the lemons. The lemons don't look overly lemony. Like, I get you maybe, but then when you see the full size, you're like, oh no, the shape of them, the color, the way that the light's hitting them, like, there, you really read them as like a I don't know if it's a bowl of lemons or whether it's just sitting on the side. Yeah, they're just sitting on the side of the table. But in real life, lemons are not always going to be bright yellow. Like, they're a little bit more faded. And again, when you bring that into Minecraft, that's full of all these bright colors. Take a golden apple, for example. And everything is very cartoony, but then all of the paintings that have been scaled down, a lot of the colors are very muted and very realistic, which works very well in an oil painting, but doesn't necessarily translate. Some of them do work well. Oh, the Sea, which is Tides. It's Oh, the Sea is the name of the original piece. And there's more to it, but what you see in the Minecraft version still makes sense. Like, it's called Tides. It looks like there's an ocean. You see a cliff. You see a person kind of like probably in a sad kind of sitting position. And that's it. You don't see the dog at all in the, I mean, it's a little blob. And you don't see a lot of the details. Like, in the original painting, the figure is nude, but that doesn't, you don't see that in the pixelated version. And there's a lighthouse on the cliff. Not as important, but like, there's definitely a little bit more going on in that original piece. And the colors are still there. Like, it still has some bright stuff to it. But I feel like when you look at the original, I think it's just because the level of detail, and we talk about this when we build in Minecraft too, when we talk about the different things you try to draw your attention to. One of the things that gets lost when you translate something down to pixel art is, while the light and the dark and the contrast is still there, the level of detail in important areas and the lack of detail in unimportant areas just gets lost. It just gets turned into pixel mud. So in the original version of that Tides that's called Oh the Sea, that streak of light where all the grass is, where the figure is highly detailed. There's a lot of little brush strokes that are in there. Whereas the background cliff, it's very subtle in comparison. And so as a result, the painting feels like it's a much brighter painting. Whereas this, the pixel version still reads as pretty dark and moody when you look at the pixel version compared to it. So there's definitely I don't want to say meaning lost, but there's a translation error or a lack of translation in some of the pieces when you're breaking them down. Certainly the pieces that have collages in them, you don't see the collage elements. That doesn't read at all, you know?
Yeah, I kind of wonder if that has something to say about how we interpret stuff in Minecraft in general. Because if you think back to the episode we did with Adam Clark, he was talking about how a lot of adults, when they see this blocky world, have difficulty interpreting it as a real-world landscape because of how square everything is. And I sort of wonder if these paintings are sort of running into the same problem of, like, you're trying to work with a complex subject matter and distill it down to a set of pixels on a canvas in a video game with a limited resolution. And, you know, the maximum width of these things is 4 blocks, I guess. There aren't really any paintings that go wider or taller than 4. So you are left with, you know, 64 pixels with maximum in which to translate this very complex image, and it becomes a lot trickier to do that. But players are still going to find some meaning in that. And if there are landscapes in there, then landscapes that are more complex because there's an original painting are potentially going to be inspiring to those players. Whereas if they look at the pack.png painting that Sarah Boving added, that's an image that's pretty synonymous with loading up a new world in Minecraft and the default icon that shows up there. And it looks like a typical Minecraft hill, but it's not necessarily going to inspire them to go out there and build something that looks like that because they're seeing hills like that anywhere in their game, right?
Yeah.
So perhaps the inclusion of art like this leaves it open to interpretation by the player, and then the player can make a decision about, do I try and create an environment that looks like this environment in the painting, and then have the painting hung up side by side with the environment. Like I can see the courtyard painting being something that players try to build in game and then try and compare it side by side with the painting to see if it looks anywhere similar. Like if you're able to approach that with Minecraft's block palette.
Yeah, I don't find that a lot of the paintings are clear enough to me to even suggest that kind of environment, you know, like
sure, yeah, like where do you start,
some of them
kind
are,
of thing.
Yeah, I mean, like the pond, sure, but there seems to be a lot of stuff that just wouldn't translate very well to Minecraft. So even if you wanted to do a recreation of something like this in Minecraft, I don't know that it would really. I think you would run into some roadblocks pretty quickly in trying to reproduce it. So I don't know. It's one of those things where if paintings had more of a variety in terms of colors and were bolder, then I feel like there could be more multiple uses for them. In the same way that players are using glow ink on signs and then hiding part of the sign and letting the glow ink show to create like track lighting or cyberpunk type stuff. Like I feel like those kind of things that really make signs and glow ink really flexible are missing from paintings where, you know, to my knowledge, you can't put a painting on a wall and then hide part of it, you know, and only see the top or only see the side. Because if something was the right color, or if I'll use the meditative one from Sarah Boving, which is just a poppy with a blue background. Like if you could hide part of that and it ended up being a really cool blue dash, or if you somehow positioned it where the red poppy could be used as like a light or some other thing other than reading as a flower, that would be interesting. I mean, that's a 1x1 painting, but I'm using it as an example just because of the simplicity of it. But I feel like if you were able to do that and use parts of paintings then that could become very interesting. But as it stands now, like I said earlier, when you go to apply a painting to the wall, you have to have the space to do it. And then you're basically clicking and hoping that you get the one that you want until you do.
Yeah.
And previously, there were 20 few paintings compared to there are now, which means that it's going to take you a lot longer to get the one that you want, depending on the size, as they've increased the number of paintings within each size category by a great number in some cases, including some new sizes too.
Yeah, I think that's the positive thing to take away from this for somebody who's not that interested in the painting's subject matter is the amount of canvas sizes that we have. With the 15 that Christopher Zetterstrand has added, there are some which are 3x3, some which are 3x4, so 3 wide and 4 high, and there are additional ones to fill out the 4 wide by 2 high category, which I think previously only had one painting. So there are now 8 3x3 paintings and 2 3x4 paintings, which makes a lot more sense to builders who prefer to build with odd number length walls and would want a painting to occupy the center line of that, where previously you'd have to either put, a 2x2 painting on either side of that center line, or, do all kinds of different perspective tricks or whatever to make it look like a painting was in the middle of a room. And I think that's potential there for people who want to add their own paintings. Not to mention the fact that in today's Snapshot, paintings have also been made data-driven, and I think that allows players to add their own paintings to the existing library without modifying any of the paintings that are currently in-game. So I've seen a few people getting excited about that, along with also the ability to add your own enchantments. But that's something I think we'll save for a future discussion down the line, perhaps when the data pack creators have had a chance to play around with those a little bit more. But I think, the fact that we now have additional canvas sizes possible makes for some potential for people to not just have a better time decorating vanilla interiors, but also, if you want to go the extra mile, apply your own resource packs, bring your own paintings into the game, you've got a lot more potential canvas sizes to do that, which is going to make people a lot happier to have that in their back pocket.
Yeah, that was one of the notes that I had too, is that if you were previously sacrificing some of the Minecraft paintings to do decor stuff like a flat screen TV in a modern setting or kitchen utensils hanging on the wall, you're no longer going to have to sacrifice as many paintings with just a resource pack. If you have a couple of those horizontal paintings or vertical paintings that you like, then you can still have those and your TV and your curtains or whatever it is. But then to your point, the data-driven stuff, if you can add paintings on top of what's already there, then I think that's great too. Because that's always the trick, especially when you're on a multiplayer server. Like, you have to make sure that everybody has the same resource pack. So then when they come to your modern apartment, they don't see a giant flaming skull on the wall where you want them to see a TV. I think that there's some balance there. But I would love to see. I don't know how they would do it, but I would love to see the ability of the Minecraft player to be able to influence the painting or somehow create their own painting. In the same way, I guess right now the way to do it is with map art. Like, that's how people do it in the game.
Mm-hmm.
But if you wanted to do something like for an effect, I think that would be really interesting. I remember a Hermitcraft season where a room was made entirely white because of the map art. And if you light it the right way, then you can't see the seams and it just looks like a really Matrix-like white box. And I think it'd be interesting if you had paintings that you could just grab solid colors of, or textures that you want to do. I feel like there could be a lot of possibility there. But again, like, at what point are you just relying so heavily on data packs and resource packs that you're just kind of getting outside of what would be considered vanilla Minecraft?
Here is a change I will pitch for player quality of life, because I think one of the pain points working with paintings is the trial and error process of, in survival at least, placing it on the wall and then breaking it because it's not the one you want. I think once a painting is on the wall, you should be able to cycle through all of the other ones by interacting with it using a brush. And obviously, like, those are two items that the brush is intended for archaeology, but you think of brushes, you think of painting, right? So
Sure.
I think it'd be a really nice thing to right-click on it with a brush, the sweeping animation plays, and it just goes to the next painting in the cycle. And I think that'd really please Minecraft players who rely on paintings for detail, whilst also giving some more fun functionality to the brush as a tool. So I honestly think that's, if not something that we can expect in vanilla, something that could be applied using a data pack, considering that paintings are now going to be manipulated more easily using the amount of that's been exposed to data pack creators. And so, yeah, I'm gonna advocate for that as a change I would like when people ask me now, because I like that idea. But I do think it's great that we have new paintings, and I'm looking forward to a bit more feedback on those. So if you folks want to share your thoughts on the new paintings in the game, of course, we'd love to get some email on that. So send that in to the usual email address. That's where we're going to leave this episode of The Spawn Chunks. You can find more information about the show and links to some of the stuff that we've talked about today at thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show is composed by me, and The Spawn Chunks is proud to be a listener-supported podcast. If you're getting some value out of the show, why not consider putting some value back in? You can visit patreon.com/thespawnchunks to join our community, where pledging at any level will get you an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat. You can listen to the show live when we record it in Discord every week, and we have our monthly hangouts where patrons can let us know what they've been up to in Minecraft that month. We currently have 321 patrons, which is down 3 from last week. We would love to welcome some more people in this week. Special thanks go out to our content engineer patrons, Hunter555, Jumbo Sale, Mindtrip Media, Party Voyager, and Yitz. Thank you all for your support on this episode.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. You can find us at The Spawn Chunks on social media. New episodes are available on Mondays on all of the major podcasting platforms. That includes YouTube. You can email the show once again at spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. The RSS feed is linked at thespawnchunks.com, and the patron-only RSS feed is on the Patreon page. That's where you can listen to the render distance, the extended version of the podcast.
My name is Jonny, but online I go by Pixelriffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/Pixelriffs, where the Minecraft Survival Guide is currently in its 3rd season, and I'm also playing on Minecraft SOS. I stream 3 days a week on Twitch, where I'll probably be digging more of that hole on Minecraft SOS, but I typically do behind-the-scenes work for my YouTube series there. I'm also the voice of the unofficial Hermitcraft recap, which you can find through a quick YouTube search, and aside from that, I'm at Pixelriffs on both Twitter and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
Links to everything that I'm doing online can be found at joelduggan.com. That includes the Citadel Cafe, my other podcast about sci-fi and fantasy entertainment. Should be recording a new episode this week with Steven ESC. As far as I know, we're going to be talking about Fallout, the new show on Prime. I'm Joel Duggan on social media and Joel Duggan on Twitch, where I stream Thursday through Sunday, pushing to finish the details in West Hill.
Thanks for visiting The Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite, but you can paint it